The cargo bay of the alien station smelled of oil, metal, and smoke. Workers moved everywhere, carrying heavy containers and shouting orders in a dozen different languages. Among them, the human newcomer, Daniel, walked slowly, trying to adjust to the chaos. His job was simple: help maintain the machinery and keep the supply lines working. He thought it would be just another long shift like every other job he had taken. But then his eyes fell on her. She was bent over a broken loader, her small hands stained with grease, her movements quick and precise. She looked like an ordinary alien worker, thin frame, gray work clothes, and a heavy hoodie pulled low over her head. At first glance, she blended with the others. Nothing special, nothing important. But something about the way she moved caught Daniel's attention. She wasn't clumsy like the other workers. Every tool she touched, she used with confidence, like she had done this 1,000 times before. He watched her from a distance, curious but not suspicious yet. She didn't speak to anyone. While others laughed, argued, or complained, she stayed silent, eyes focused only on her work. When one of the bigger aliens shouted at her to move, she simply nodded and shifted out of the way without a word. Too quiet, Daniel thought. Almost like she didn't belong there. Later, when his shift took him closer to her station, he noticed something strange. Her hoodie slipped slightly as she bent down, and for a brief second he saw a faint glow on the side of her neck. It looked like a tattoo, but not ordinary, lines shaped in patterns he had only seen once before during his training. Military reports had shown similar marks on alien royalty, those born to rule. Daniel shook his head quickly. No, impossible. Why would someone like that be working here, fixing broken machines in the dark corners of a cargo bay? He told himself he was imagining things. Still, he couldn't stop staring. At one point, she must have felt his gaze, because she suddenly looked up. Her eyes locked with his. They were a shade of deep silver, unlike any he had ever seen. For a heartbeat, he felt a chill run through him, as if she could see straight through his skin into his thoughts. But then she looked away and continued her work as if nothing had happened. Daniel tried to focus on his own tasks, but her presence stayed in his mind. When the siren blared, signaling a shift change, most workers rushed out, eager for rest. But she didn't move. She stayed behind, still fixing the loader as if she didn't care about food or sleep. Daniel found that strange. Nobody ever worked longer than required. In this station, laziness was normal. Why would she choose to stay? He decided to test her. Walking closer, he crouched beside the broken loader and said, "Need help?" His voice was casual, but he was watching her reaction closely. She froze for a second, then slowly turned her head. Her face was shadowed by the hoodie, but he could see the outline of sharp features, smoother than most workers. She gave a small shake of her head. No. Her voice was soft, almost too soft for the noisy bay. It carried something that made him pause. There was no accent, no roughness like the common workers had. It was clear, almost refined. Daniel tried again. "You've been working for hours? Aren't you tired?" She tightened the grip on her tool and replied, "Machines don't fix themselves." Then she returned to her task, shutting him out completely. He raised his eyebrows. Strange girl, he thought. Definitely not like the others. He left her alone but kept watching from a distance. Later that night, when most lights in the bay dimmed and the noise faded, Daniel returned to grab a forgotten tool. The area was nearly empty, but he heard the sound of clanking metal. She was still there, hood pulled tight, working silently in the shadows. He watched her hands move, quick, steady, too skilled for a simple laborer. Then it happened again. As she reached forward, her sleeve rolled up slightly. A mark on her wrist glowed faintly under the dim light. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. It was the same pattern. Royal insignia, he was sure this time. He remembered the reports clearly, the family crest of a ruling house. But what was it doing here on the wrist of a girl disguised as a worker? He stepped back into the shadows before she could notice him. His mind raced. Either she was hiding something, or he had just stumbled into something far bigger than his ordinary job. The station was supposed to be a safe trade hub, but secrets like this could mean danger, political war, assassination plots, maybe even rebellion. When she finally stood and stretched, she glanced around carefully, like a thief checking if anyone was watching. Her hood slipped again for just a moment, and Daniel saw her face more clearly. Not fully, but enough to notice the symmetry, the fine lines, and the calm pride in her expression. No worker looked like that. No worker carried themselves with such quiet control. He pressed himself against the wall, hidden in the shadows. She didn't see him. She walked quickly toward a restricted corridor, a place no worker had permission to enter. The doors opened for her without hesitation. Daniel's eyes widened. Workers never had access codes. That was privilege reserved for officers and royals. The door closed behind her, leaving him alone in the silent bay. His pulse raced. She wasn't a worker. She couldn't be. And yet, no one else seemed to notice, or maybe they were too afraid to care. For the first time since arriving on the station, Daniel felt something stir in his chest, danger and curiosity mixing together. Whoever she wasn't supposed to be here. And he, by accident, had seen too much. He told himself to forget it, to mind his own work and stay safe. But his gut told him that from this moment forward, his life would no longer be simple. The girl in the hoodie was going to change everything. Daniel tried to push the strange girl from his mind, but it was impossible. Every day when he returned to the cargo bay, he found himself watching her. She was always there before him, already working, and she always left after him, as if she never slept. Her clothes were always the same, gray, worn, and covered in grease. Her hood stayed low, shadowing most of her face. To others, she was invisible, just another worker. But Daniel had seen too much to believe that. He noticed her behavior more carefully now. When someone passed too close to her, she stiffened instantly. Once, a bulky alien worker slapped her shoulder, joking with her the way they all did with each other. The reaction was sharp and frightening. She spun around, her hand snapping forward, fingers curled like claws. For a second, Daniel thought she would attack him, but then she stopped herself, lowered her arm, and simply walked away in silence. The other worker laughed nervously and pretended nothing happened. Daniel knew what he saw. Those movements were not of a common worker. They were trained, controlled, dangerous. The more he observed, the more he felt the same unease. She never laughed, never complained, never joined the others when they rested or shared food. When the bell rang for mealtime, she stayed behind, working alone. Sometimes Daniel caught her whispering under her breath, not in the common language of the station, but in something older, heavier, words that felt forbidden. He couldn't understand, but the sound made his skin prickle. One evening, after most shifts had ended, Daniel followed her at a distance. He was careful, hiding behind machines and piles of crates. She moved quickly, checking over her shoulder as if she knew she might be watched. At the end of the bay, she slipped through a half-open maintenance hatch. Daniel hesitated, his heart pounding, but curiosity dragged him closer. He peered inside and saw her crouched over a small device glowing faint blue. It wasn't a worker's tool. It looked like a communicator, military grade. She tapped commands with speed, her silver eyes reflecting the glow. For a moment, her hood slipped back enough for him to see the markings on her neck again, brighter than before. She froze suddenly, as if sensing him. Daniel ducked down, holding his breath. After a few tense seconds, she pulled the hood back tighter, shut down the device, and left without a word. Daniel stayed hidden until she was gone, his mind racing. A worker with royal markings using a secret communicator in the dead of night? She was hiding something far greater than he imagined. The next day, the bay was filled with noise again, but Daniel couldn't take his eyes off her. She worked on a power coupler, hands steady and precise. Suddenly, sparks shot out and the machine jolted. Workers shouted, jumping back in panic. She didn't move. Calmly, she reached into the smoke and twisted a switch, cutting the surge. The machine powered down safely. Everyone stared, surprised at her quick reaction. But instead of explaining herself, she lowered her head and went back to work as if nothing had happened. Daniel caught the look on her face. It wasn't relief. It was control, as if she had expected the danger and knew exactly how to stop it. Later that night, Daniel heard two workers gossiping. They said the girl was strange, that she never ate with them, never spoke, and never got tired. Some whispered she wasn't even a worker at all, but a spy planted to watch over them. Others said she was cursed, touched by something unnatural. Daniel listened quietly, but he knew the truth was bigger than any of their rumors. The real proof came a few days later. Daniel was assigned near the restricted docking tunnels, where no ordinary worker was allowed. As he checked a scanner, he saw her again. She slipped from the shadows, moving swiftly, heading straight toward the locked doors. He froze. Workers didn't have codes for those doors. Yet when she approached, the panel lit up and the door opened for her without resistance. She vanished inside, leaving Daniel stunned. He stood there, unsure if he should report it. If he told the guards, she would be caught, but something inside him whispered that would be a mistake. She was hiding. Yes, but not like a criminal. There was something desperate in the way she moved, something like fear. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her silver eyes in the glow of that communicator. The sharp way she reacted to being touched, the way the doors had opened for her without hesitation. None of it matched the picture of a poor laborer. She was playing a role, pretending to be something she wasn't. But why? What was she running from? The next day, he got his answer, or at least part of it. During a shift inspection, a squad of armored guards entered the bay. Their leader barked questions, demanding to know if anyone had seen unusual behavior. The workers shifted nervously but said nothing. Daniel's eyes slid to the girl. She stood still, her hood low, tools in her hands. But he noticed the way her shoulders tensed, the way her hand gripped the spanner so tightly it shook. The guards searched quickly and left, but in that short moment, Daniel saw something that confirmed his fears. She wasn't just hiding from curious workers. She was hiding from the guards themselves. And if the guards wanted her found, it meant she was important. Very important. When the noise died down, she looked up briefly, and her silver eyes met his. For the first time, there was no calm control, no cold distance. For just a heartbeat, Daniel saw fear in her gaze. And then she turned away, acting like nothing had happened. Daniel stood frozen, his mind in turmoil. She was not who she pretended to be, and he had no idea what kind of storm he had stepped into. But deep inside, he knew one thing for sure. The simple alien worker was a lie, and the truth behind that hood was going to change everything for him. The day began like any other in the cargo bay, loud and crowded with workers moving crates, repairing machines, and shouting orders at one another. Daniel tried to keep his head down, but his eyes kept wandering to her. The strange girl in the gray hoodie was again fixing a loader, silent and focused as always. But something about the air felt different that morning. There was tension, whispers passing quickly between workers, and the sound of boots marching in the distance. Then the sirens rang, loud, sharp, echoing through every corner of the station. Workers froze for a moment, fear flashing in their eyes. Sirens meant only two things, an accident or a security inspection. Daniel's chest tightened when he saw the armored guards enter. Their heavy boots slammed against the metal floor, and their masks hid their expressions. They moved with the cold precision of men hunting for something specific. "Line up!" the guard captain barked. The workers obeyed immediately, dropping tools and forming rows. Daniel stood among them, his pulse racing. He didn't know why, but his eyes immediately searched for her. She hesitated for a second before slowly stepping into line with the others. Her hood was pulled so low that even her chin was hidden. The guards walked past them, scanning each face. They carried tablets, checking records, comparing appearances. Daniel could feel the fear in the bay. Everyone hated inspections. If a worker's papers didn't match, if someone had a small crime in their past, they could be dragged away and never seen again. One guard stopped in front of the girl. He stared at her hoodie and growled, "Remove it." She stayed still, gripping the edges of her sleeves tightly. For a moment, Daniel thought she might refuse. The air grew heavy. Workers glanced at one another nervously. The guard stepped closer, hand on his weapon. "Now," he ordered. Slowly, she raised her hands and touched the edge of her hood. Daniel felt his breath catch. He had wondered for days what was beneath it, but part of him had never expected to actually see. The fabric slid back, and for the first time, her face was revealed. It was not the face of a worker. Her skin was smooth, almost glowing under the harsh lights. Her cheekbones were sharp, her features elegant, too perfect, too controlled. But what struck Daniel most were her eyes, bright silver, deep and endless, shining with both strength and sadness. And then the truth struck him even harder. On her forehead, just above her brow, faint but unmistakable, were markings of royal heritage, lines and symbols carved by birthright, impossible to fake. The guards froze. For a heartbeat, even they looked uncertain. Workers gasped quietly, some taking a step back. Daniel's chest tightened. He remembered the old reports, the warnings in military records, the same symbol carved into history books. She was not a worker. She was a princess. The girl met the guard's gaze with cold calmness, as if daring him to challenge her. "Is there a problem?" she asked softly. Her voice was no longer the quiet whisper of a worker. It carried authority, control, the voice of someone who had been obeyed her entire life. The guard faltered. His eyes flicked toward his captain, unsure what to do. The captain stepped forward, glaring hard at her, but even he hesitated for just a second. "Cover yourself," he snapped finally, as if the sight of her was too dangerous to leave exposed. She lowered the hood again, hiding her face, but the damage was done. Everyone had seen. Daniel's heart pounded so loud he thought others might hear it. He replayed the moment in his head. The markings, the silver eyes, the way the guards had reacted. There was no mistake. The girl he had thought was just a simple worker was royalty, hiding here in the filth of a cargo bay. The guards finished their inspection quickly after that, but Daniel noticed they didn't question her again. They walked past her, avoiding her eyes, and left the bay. Workers returned to their tasks, but the silence was heavy. No one dared whisper about what they had seen. Some looked away from her completely, pretending nothing had happened. Others kept stealing nervous glances. Daniel stayed rooted to the spot, staring at her. She bent over her work again, pretending to be nothing more than a worker. But he could not unsee her face. He remembered the chill he felt the first time she had looked at him, the strange way she carried herself, the symbols glowing on her skin. It all made sense now. She wasn't hiding from workers. She was hiding from the Empire itself. When she felt his eyes on her, she turned her head slightly. For a brief second, her gaze locked with his. This time, there was no cold distance. There was warning. She knew he had seen her, and she was telling him without words to stay silent. Daniel looked away quickly, but his mind was spinning. A royal princess disguised as a laborer, hiding in the shadows of a station? What had driven her here? Who was she hiding from? And why was she risking everything by working in the open, surrounded by people who could betray her at any moment? He tried to go back to his own duties, but every sound felt distant. His thoughts were trapped on the image of her face under that hood. She wasn't a rumor anymore. She wasn't a mystery. She was real, and she was dangerous. If anyone else reported her, the entire bay could be caught in the storm of whatever political war she carried on her shoulders. By the time the shift ended, Daniel knew nothing would be the same. He had seen what no worker was meant to see. He had discovered a secret that could shake the Empire. And whether he wanted it or not, he was now part of it. Because the moment she revealed her face, she had noticed him too. And something in her eyes told him clearly she would not let him walk away so easily. Daniel could not erase the picture of her face from his mind. The markings on her skin, the glow in her silver eyes, the way the guards had hesitated, it all screamed of power, of hidden truth. For days, he tried to convince himself that he had imagined it, but deep down he knew he hadn't. She was not just a worker. She was someone the whole galaxy would bow to or fear. And now he had seen her secret. The cargo bay was loud again, machines roaring and workers shouting, but Daniel felt the silence between him and her louder than everything else. She worked as if nothing had happened, hood back in place, tools moving quickly in her hands. But Daniel noticed her glances. Every so often, she would check if he was watching. And when their eyes met, there was no mistaking the warning inside hers. That evening, when most workers left for rest, Daniel stayed behind to finish repairing a broken scanner. He thought she had gone too. But then he heard footsteps. He turned, and there she was, standing in the shadows, hood still low, but he could feel her eyes on him. His chest tightened. She stepped closer, slow and careful. The noise of the bay was gone now, leaving only the sound of his own heartbeat. She stopped just a few feet away and spoke, her voice calm but sharp like a blade. "You saw me." Daniel swallowed hard. He wanted to deny it, but the words caught in his throat. Her presence was overwhelming, as if she carried an invisible weight of authority. She didn't need to shout. Even in whispers, her voice commanded attention. "You know what I am," she continued, her silver eyes faintly glowing under the dim lights. "That makes you dangerous to me." Daniel took a step back, his hands lifting slightly as if to show he meant no harm. "I didn't tell anyone," he said quickly. "I won't." Her head tilted slightly, as if studying him. "Why should I believe that?" she asked. Her hand rested lightly on the edge of her sleeve, and for a second Daniel thought she might pull out a hidden weapon. His stomach twisted. She was faster, stronger, more skilled than any worker here. If she wanted to silence him, she could. "You don't have to trust me," Daniel answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I don't gain anything by talking. I don't care who you are. I just want to do my job." Her eyes narrowed. "If you speak of me to anyone, both of us will die. Not just you, not just me. The guards will kill everyone in this bay to keep the secret. Do you understand?" Daniel froze at her words. The fear in her tone wasn't just for herself. She truly believed that an entire section of the station could be wiped out if her identity was revealed. He stared at her, and for the first time, he saw something more than power in her eyes. He saw desperation. He lowered his voice. "Why are you here? Why hide like this?" For a moment, she didn't answer. Her hand trembled slightly, then tightened into a fist. "Because my life is not my own anymore," she whispered. "There are those who want me dead. If they find me, they won't stop at killing me. They will burn this entire station to ash to erase my presence." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. She wasn't exaggerating. He could see it in her face, the shadow of someone who had lived under constant threat. He wanted to ask more, but her sharp gaze silenced him. "You don't need to know everything," she said firmly. "All you need to do is stay quiet. Forget what you saw. If you try to use my secret for gain, if you speak even a word of it, you won't live long enough to regret it." Daniel stared at her, torn between fear and pity. She was dangerous, yes, but she was also alone. Her words weren't just a threat, they were a plea. She needed him to stay silent, and that meant she couldn't do this alone. "I don't want to hurt you," Daniel said softly, "and I won't betray you, but you can't expect me to forget. You're not like the others. I saw what the guards did. They were afraid of you. Who are you really?" Her hood shifted as she turned away, hiding her face in deeper shadows. She didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said in a voice almost too low to hear, "Someone who should already be dead." The words sank into Daniel like a stone. He wanted to ask what she meant, but she stepped back quickly. "Enough," she said sharply. "You will keep this to yourself. That is the only way you survive." Before he could reply, she was gone, disappearing into the dark corridors with silent steps. Daniel stood alone, his breath shaky, his thoughts spinning. He had been given a choice without being asked, silence or death. He knew she was right. If he spoke of her, others would come. And if she was telling the truth about enemies hunting her, the station would pay the price. Yet he couldn't shake the look in her eyes, the flicker of helplessness hidden behind her cold warning. She wasn't just a princess hiding from danger. She was trapped, carrying a burden too heavy for one person. And now, against his will, Daniel was part of it. As he finally left the bay, he knew one thing with certainty. He couldn't walk away from this anymore. The secret tied him to her, whether he wanted it or not. And soon, he would have to decide not only if he would keep it, but if he would stand with her when the truth came crashing down. Daniel could not sleep after that night. Her words repeated in his head like an echo. "If they find me, they won't stop at killing me. They will burn this entire station to ash." He wanted to push it away, to convince himself it was not his problem, but the truth was heavy in his chest. He had seen her face, he had heard her secret, and now there was no turning back. The next day, he found her again in the cargo bay, working as if nothing had happened. Her hood was low, her hands steady on the tools, but Daniel noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. She was waiting, testing him, watching if he would betray her. He didn't speak to her at first. He just worked nearby, pretending to be busy. But inside his head, the storm kept growing stronger. Finally, when the bay was quieter and most workers had gone, he walked over. She did not look up, but her grip tightened on the spanner in her hand. "Why are you still here?" she asked coldly. Daniel hesitated. He wanted to choose his words carefully. "Because I need answers. I can't keep your secret unless I understand what it means." She sighed, a sound of both anger and exhaustion. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, finally, she lowered the tool and leaned against the loader. Her silver eyes glowed faintly beneath the hood. You are stubborn, she whispered. Very well, but once you hear this, you can never go back. Daniel nodded. I already can't go back. She studied him for a moment, as if measuring his soul. Then she spoke. I am not just royalty. I am the last heir of my house. My family is gone, murdered in a coup led by generals who wanted the throne for themselves. I escaped, but they think I am dead. If they discover I live, everything I touch will burn. They will send assassins. They will purge the station. That is why I wear this hood and live as a worker. It is the only way to stay invisible. Her words cut through Daniel like a knife. A coup, murder, assassins. She wasn't simply hiding from guards. She was running from an empire at war with itself. Suddenly, her silence, her control, her strange behavior, all of it made sense. She was surviving. But why here? Daniel asked quietly. Why hide in a place like this, where the risk is so high? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Because the enemy does not look for a princess among slaves. They expect me to run to allies, to rebels, to safe houses. They will never search the lowest levels of a cargo bay. She looked away, her voice softening for the first time. And because here, for a short time, I can pretend to be nothing. Daniel felt a strange mix of pity and respect. She had lost everything, yet she stood strong. But at the same time, he understood the danger better now. If her enemies discovered she was alive, the workers, the guards, even he himself would be nothing more than ashes under their boots. He exhaled slowly. So what happens now? You keep hiding? For how long? Her eyes flicked back to his, sharp again. Until I can return, until I can strike back. Daniel blinked. Strike back? She leaned closer, her voice a whisper. I am not just running. I am waiting. Somewhere out there, loyal forces are gathering. They need time, they need a signal, and when the moment comes, I will rise again. The generals think they killed me, but they are wrong. I will take back what was stolen. Daniel stared at her in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on him. She was not just a refugee. She was a fighter, a leader in exile, planning her return. And now, because he had seen her face, he was part of that secret. Before he could respond, a sudden noise shook the bay. Heavy boots, voices. The guards were back. Daniel's blood ran cold. He and the princess exchanged a sharp look. No time to argue, no time to think. This way, she hissed, grabbing his arm. He followed her, heart pounding, as she dragged him toward the far end of the bay. She moved fast, slipping between shadows with the skill of someone who had done this 100 times. Daniel stumbled after her, barely keeping up. They ducked behind a stack of crates as the guards entered, scanning the room. Search everywhere, the captain barked. We had reports of unauthorized access near this sector. Daniel's stomach dropped. Unauthorized access. They must have tracked her from the restricted corridor. The princess crouched low, her breathing steady, despite the danger. Daniel looked at her, amazed at how calm she seemed, while his own chest felt like it might explode. She whispered, "Stay quiet. Do not move until I say." Minutes felt like hours as the guards swept through the bay. One came close, so close Daniel could hear the hum of his weapon. He held his breath, sweat running down his neck. The princess's hand pressed against his arm, firm and steady, keeping him still. At last, the guard moved on. The captain barked another order, and slowly, the squad left. The sound of their boots faded into silence. Daniel exhaled in relief, but his relief did not last. She released his arm and looked at him with sharp eyes. Do you see now? This is why you cannot leave. You know my secret. That means you are in danger as much as I am. If they catch you, they will rip the truth out of you before you die. Daniel swallowed hard. She was right. His life was already tied to hers, whether he wanted it or not. So what do you want me to do? He asked quietly. Her gaze softened, just for a second. Help me survive, she whispered. Help me keep the secret until I am strong enough to take back what is mine. You have no choice now. Either you stand with me, or you fall with me. Daniel's heart raced, but he didn't look away. For reasons he couldn't explain, he nodded. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was pity, or maybe it was something else, something deeper he felt when he saw the fire burning in her silver eyes. Whatever it was, his choice was made. He would protect her secret. And in that moment, he knew his ordinary life as a simple worker was over. He was standing at the edge of a storm that would shake the galaxy. The corridors outside the cargo bay were dim and narrow, filled with the hum of pipes and the hiss of steam. Daniel followed her closely, his steps uneven against her smooth, silent movements. She didn't stumble, didn't hesitate. Every step she took was precise, as if she had memorized the entire maze of the station. He struggled to keep up, his breath loud in his own ears, but she moved like a shadow. They slipped into a small maintenance tunnel, the air damp and heavy. She finally stopped, turning to face him. "You're too loud," she whispered sharply. "If you keep dragging your feet like that, they'll hear us before we escape." Daniel bristled, but he tried to calm his breathing. "I'm not trained for this," he muttered. "I'm just a mechanic." Her silver eyes glimmered faintly in the darkness as she studied him. "And yet you are still here. You could have run the moment the guards came." "I didn't have much of a choice," he said, rubbing the sweat from his forehead. "You pulled me with you." For a moment she said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, she gave the smallest hint of a smile, cold but real. "Perhaps you are smarter than you look. Running would have gotten you killed." She crouched near a broken panel, pulling off the outer plate with her bare hands. Daniel blinked in surprise. The strength she showed was far greater than her slim frame suggested. Inside the panel was a network of wires glowing faintly blue. With practiced fingers, she twisted two together, and the hidden hatch beside them clicked open. Daniel stared. "You knew about this tunnel?" "I know many things you do not," she replied simply. Then she motioned for him to follow, stepping inside the hatch. The passage beyond was cramped, forcing them to walk hunched. Pipes dripped with condensation, and faint sparks flickered from old wiring. Daniel wiped grease from his hands, trying not to slip. She moved ahead, unbothered by the filth, her hood brushing against the low ceiling. As they crawled deeper, Daniel's frustration bubbled out. "Why trust me at all? Why pull me into this? You could have left me back there and gone alone." She stopped suddenly and turned her head slightly, her glowing eyes piercing through the shadows. "Because you already know my secret," she said quietly. "That makes you a danger. If I left you, sooner or later you would speak. Not because you want to, but because fear or greed would push you. With me, you cannot betray me. You survive only if I survive." Daniel froze at her bluntness. She wasn't sugarcoating anything. To her, their connection was not friendship. It was survival tied together by force. Still, there was something in the way she said it, something softer hiding behind the sharpness. She didn't want to admit it, but she trusted him more than she let on. The tunnel widened into a small chamber where they could finally stand. She leaned against the wall, pulling back her hood just enough to reveal her face in the dim blue glow of the pipes. Daniel couldn't stop himself from staring. She was striking, regal even in exhaustion. Her silver eyes seemed to carry both fire and sorrow. "You've seen enough to know what I am," she said, "but you don't yet understand what that means." Daniel crossed his arms. "Then explain it. I deserve to know if my life is already tied to yours." For a long time she stayed silent, as if fighting with herself. Then she finally spoke. "I was raised to rule, trained in diplomacy, combat, and strategy. Every word I spoke, every step I took, was judged by others. But when my family was slaughtered, none of that mattered. The generals thought they ended my bloodline. They celebrated their victory." Her voice cracked for just a moment, the first sign of true pain he had heard from her. "They don't know I live, and I intend to keep it that way until the time is right." Daniel's chest tightened. He could see the weight pressing on her, the loneliness of someone who had lost everything. She looked like a worker now, covered in grease and dirt. But in that moment, he saw the truth. She was a queen without a throne, a warrior without an army. He stepped closer. "Then you can't keep doing this alone. You'll burn yourself out hiding in shadows." Her eyes flicked up to him sharply. "Do not mistake me for weak. I can survive longer than you can imagine." "I don't doubt that," Daniel said softly. "But even the strongest can fall if they fight alone." The silence between them stretched. For a moment he thought she might snap at him again, but instead something unexpected happened. Her shoulders lowered, her fists unclenched, and she let out a shaky breath. "You are a fool," she murmured almost too quietly to hear, "but perhaps a useful fool." Daniel couldn't help but laugh under his breath. "I'll take that as a compliment." Her lips twitched, the ghost of a smile flickering and vanishing. She turned away quickly, pulling her hood back up. "Do not expect kindness from me. If I say run, you run. If I say fight, you fight. If you hesitate, you die. That is the only way you survive at my side. Daniel nodded. Understood. But I have one condition. She raised an eyebrow. Condition? If I'm risking my life for you, then I want honesty. No more half-truths. If I'm going to stand with you, I deserve to know when danger is coming. She studied him for a long time, her eyes unreadable. At last, she gave a small nod. Very well. You will have honesty, but you may regret asking for it. Before Daniel could reply, the sound of voices echoed faintly through the tunnels, guards searching nearby. She pressed a finger to her lips, then grabbed his hand firmly, pulling him into a darker passage. The warmth of her grip startled him. For all her cold words, her touch was steady, protective even. They crouched together in the shadows, listening to the distant patrol. Daniel felt her shoulder brush against his, the closeness strange but comforting. After a tense minute, the voices faded away. She finally released his hand, but the memory of her touch lingered. When they moved again, her pace slowed just slightly, as if she was no longer running alone, but adjusting for him too. Daniel noticed it. She would never admit it, but in that moment she had already accepted him as more than a burden. As they pushed deeper into the tunnels, he felt a shift between them. The fear was still there, the danger closer than ever. But now there was also something else, a fragile thread of trust binding them together in the dark. And Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The tunnels stretched on for what felt like hours, twisting and turning beneath the station. Daniel followed her, his legs aching, his clothes damp with sweat and dust. He wanted to ask where they were going, but the look on her face kept him silent. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and every step she took carried a certainty he could not question. Finally, they emerged into a chamber larger than the others. Broken machinery and old crates lay scattered around, but in the center was something different, an old terminal, glowing faintly with power. She walked straight to it and pressed her hand against the screen. Symbols flared to life, strange patterns Daniel could not read. The machine responded instantly, unlocking a series of hidden files. Daniel stared in shock. You have access to this? She looked at him, her hood sliding back just enough for her markings to show. This is mine, she said quietly. This was placed here long before I arrived. Safe houses across the galaxy were built for my family in case of betrayal. The generals forgot this one, but I did not. Daniel's chest tightened as realization dawned. She had been hiding, yes, but she had also been preparing. Every quiet moment in the cargo bay, every step through restricted corridors, it had all been part of a larger plan. She wasn't waiting for luck. She was building her return. The terminal projected a map, small lights marking distant systems. Some glowed red, others green. Daniel didn't understand all of it, but he could see what it meant. Allies and enemies spread across the stars. She tapped a green light and whispered, "Loyal forces wait for me. Scattered, hunted, but alive. When the time is right, they will rise." Daniel's mouth went dry. "So, you're not just hiding. You're planning a war." Her eyes met his, calm but burning with fire. "Not a war," she corrected. "A liberation. My people are slaves under the generals now. They need someone to fight for them. That someone is me." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle heavy on him. He had signed up for simple work, repairing machines, fixing loaders. Now he was standing beside a fugitive princess, plotting to take back an empire. Part of him wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Another part wanted to run. But he couldn't. Not after everything he had seen. Not after the nights of hiding, the guards hunting them, the fear in her eyes when she confessed her secret. He was already bound to her fate. "Why tell me this?" he asked softly. "Why show me all of this? You don't need me." For the first time, her expression softened. The steel in her voice gave way to something quieter, almost fragile. "Because I cannot do it alone. I may be trained in many things, but even I cannot fight an empire without help. You are human. You see the world differently. You take risks others would never take. That is why I chose you." Daniel blinked. "Chose me?" Her lips curved in the faintest smile. "From the first moment you watched me, I knew you would not stay away. You could have ignored me, but you didn't. Curiosity brought you close. Loyalty kept you silent. And now, trust will decide if we survive." Daniel felt heat rise in his chest. He had never thought of himself as someone important, but her words struck something deep. He realized she wasn't only warning him, She was inviting him into her fight. Before he could reply, the terminal beeped sharply. A warning flashed across the map. Red lights spread quickly, blinking like fire. The princess's face hardened. "They've found us," she whispered. The sound of boots echoed through the tunnels, closer than before. Guards shouted orders, their voices bouncing off the metal walls. Daniel's heart pounded. "What do we do?" She closed the terminal with a swift gesture, the map vanishing into darkness. Then she pulled her hood back over her head and turned to him. "Now we run, but this time we run together." They sprinted down the tunnel, the sound of footsteps behind them growing louder. Sparks rained from the ceiling as gunfire struck the walls. Daniel stumbled, but she caught his arm and pulled him forward with surprising strength. She moved like a warrior now, no longer hiding, and every step filled with determination. At a fork in the tunnel, she stopped suddenly. "Go left," she ordered. Daniel looked at her in panic. "What about you?" She shook her head. "I will draw them away. You have seen my secret, my plan. If I fall, you must carry it. Do you understand?" "No," Daniel said firmly, grabbing her wrist. "I'm not leaving you. If you fight, I fight." For a second, her silver eyes widened in surprise. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Very well. Then we fight." The guards stormed into view, weapons raised. Daniel grabbed a rusted pipe from the ground, his hands shaking, while she stood tall beside him, her hood falling back to reveal the full glow of her royal markings. The guards hesitated, fear flashing in their eyes at the sight of her. "Stand down," she commanded, her voice echoing like thunder in the tunnel. For a moment, even Daniel felt the weight of her authority pressing into the air. The guards faltered, but their captain barked an order, and they raised their weapons again. The first shot rang out. Daniel ducked, swinging the pipe wildly. The princess moved faster than he could see, disarming one guard and striking him down with his own weapon. Another lunged at Daniel, but before the blow could land, she pulled him aside and countered with deadly precision. The fight was chaos, but together they pushed back, their movements slowly falling into rhythm. Daniel was clumsy but determined, and she was sharp, guiding him through the storm. When the last guard fell, silence filled the tunnel again, broken only by their heavy breaths. She looked at him, sweat glistening on her forehead, her silver eyes blazing with life. "You chose to stay," she whispered. "Now you are part of this." Daniel nodded, gripping the pipe tightly. "I guess I am." In that dark tunnel, surrounded by fallen enemies, a bond was sealed. She was no longer just a stranger in a hood. She was a princess, a rebel, a leader rising from the ashes, and Daniel was at her side. The station was no longer safe. The Empire was hunting her, and war was coming. But for the first time, Daniel did not feel afraid. He felt alive. The girl he once mistook for a simple worker had revealed her true self, and now their fates were tied together. Whatever storm waited ahead, they would face it side by side.